It's now official. The Vancouver Grizzlies are in the NBA.
The Grizzlies began playing in the fall of 1995.
I was just 6 years old when the Grizzlies came to Vancouver, and I was completely obsessed with the team. I just loved watching them, win or lose. But the true story of my team remains one of basketball's greatest unsolved mysteries.
The Grizzlies have the worst record in the history of the NBA.
At that time, we weren't very good.
They were terrible.
We were going into every game thinking we could win. It just didn't turn out that way.
It was the first time I ever started drinking beer, because I didn't think I could take it.
Even though the Grizzlies struggled to win on the court, they were my team. So when they suddenly relocated to Memphis, Tennessee in 2001, it broke my heart.
I was shocked.
Crestfallen.
I never saw it coming.
It didn't seem like it was fair, and it didn't seem right.
More than 2 decades later, I'm on a mission to figure out who killed the Vancouver Grizzlies.
There's so many people you could point fingers at.
For some reason, I put all the blame on Stu Jackson.
It almost looked as if he wanted us to not be good.
And of course, there was Steve Francis.
Oh my God, there he is, there he is, there he is.
I think Vancouver fans were absolutely lied to.
I'm going to try my best to make this a success in Vancouver.
We need to subpoena the financials or something.
And I think anytime, you leave something undone, it haunts you.
The truth may be out there, but it is difficult to find.
We need to know the truth about why the Vancouver Grizzlies left town. And I won't stop until I do.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Ooh, can you feel the suspense? Hi, everybody. It's your pal, Tim Hanlon. It's Good Seats Still Available, the curious little podcast devoted to what used to be in professional sports. I appreciate your finding us in the vast expanse of podcast land, and we appreciate you spending some time with us this week. Finally, we are able to delve into one of the blind spots that we've encountered in our first 6+ years of existence, and that is the 6 season, at least, sojourn of the Vancouver Grizzlies. Yes, the Grizzlies were in Vancouver for 6 years before they moved to Memphis in 2001. So you kids out there think that a Memphis Grizzlies franchise just grew on a tree and fell on your lap. Well, no, of course it didn't. In 1995, the NBA expanded to 2 Canadian cities, Vancouver being one of them, the other being the Toronto Raptors. And of course, this was an exciting time in the NBA's growth strategy and history, with Canada being sort of a seemingly conquerable expansion into another country on a regular basis. Toronto was an enormous success and still around today. Vancouver, not so much. And we get into that with our guest this week, Kat Jayme, who was introduced to us. First of all, she's a documentarian. She lives in and is a native of Vancouver, British Columbia. So that helps. And she was introduced to us by our pal, Andy Dolich, who will be returning to this here podcast relatively soon for his overdue part 2 conversation that we started a few weeks back. And we were flabbergasted to find, and again, we're living in the ignorance of the United States. We don't necessarily have all the understanding of the media and the culture of our brethren in the Great White North in terms of what media and documentaries and all that kind of stuff. But to our tremendous surprise and absolute delight, Kat Jayme's, in some respects, almost dedicated or devoted her entire early professional life making documentary films to various aspects of this story of the Vancouver Grizzlies. And you'll hear in our conversation coming up in a few moments, this is a personal journey. Kat grew up in the Vancouver area and, not surprisingly, as a child growing up, experienced the excitement of a brand new NBA franchise coming to Vancouver and going to games and literally kind of just becoming enmeshed and just fascinated with this franchise. the players and the game and the excitement of NBA basketball in Vancouver and all that kind of stuff. And sure enough, in 6 seasons or so, it's a team that took off for supposedly greener pastures, in this case, Memphis. And as she grew up and formalized her career path, she wound up coming back to this story, almost a very similar sort of journey that we've heard from various other people, and yours truly in particular, for the reason for this podcast. And it's a little bit of lost youth, I think, for sure, but it's also just intriguing in that we get into just sort of the zeitgeist, the whole cultural phenomenon that the Grizzlies were, what it meant to the city as a worthy destination for a basketball franchise. What happens when your team leaves? Does it, do fans still continue to remember and reminisce? Do they completely forget? All those kinds of things. And I highly recommend this film for you to view. It is called The Grizzlie Truth. And you heard there the trailer for it. It is not yet officially available in the United States, from what we know. I think that will be not an issue in the months to come. But as you can imagine, this is not the first kind of exploration of this story. You may know this name of Kat Jayme from her previous documentary in 2018 called Finding Big Country. That was an ESPN 30 for 30 feature, and is available on our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com. Search it, this episode number 312, and you'll find a convenient link to Amazon Prime Video, where you can rent it for a low price and enjoy it in all of its glory. And as the name implies, Big Country, Bryant Reeves, right, who was probably the most known player / star for this star-crossed Vancouver Grizzlies franchise. This is kind of the beginnings of this broader Vancouver Grizzlies story that Kat Jayme will take us through. That is available widely, and again, on Amazon. You can find it, I believe, also in the ESPN 30 for 30 library somehow, wherever that lives. I think that's in ESPN Plus and that kind of stuff. And Kat's done a whole bunch of other things that we'll get to in and around this Vancouver Grizzlies story. So with all due respect, I think we have stumbled across perhaps the perfect person to kind of get us into the story of the Vancouver Grizzlies and her personal journey and the films and the media that she has created for such. So why don't we get right to it? This is my conversation with documentarian Kat Jayme we had just last week. Let's talk some Vancouver Grizzlies memories and film making. Please, as always, enjoy. Let's start from the beginning, okay?
Sure.
Who are you? What's your sort of professional raison d'etre and where you're from and all that kind of stuff. And then we'll figure out a way to get into the story at hand here, because it's really cool.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Kat Jayme, and I'm a filmmaker, director based in Vancouver, BC.
And are you a lifelong resident?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And I was born and raised in Vancouver. And I'm a diehard Vancouver Grizzlies fan.
All right. Well, let's get into it then. So I'm really curious as to how you got to your professional career, maybe first and foremost, and then maybe So independent of the story per se, maybe this was part of the excuse of becoming a filmmaker. I don't know. Yeah, I mean,
I grew up with a camera pointed at in my face. Really, my grandfather was a filmmaker in the Philippines. I come from a family of filmmakers, and so in high school, I was always that kid who had a camera in their hands. And this is like pre-social media. Now everyone documents everything, but when I was in high school, we didn't have any of that. And so I would bring like my family camcorder to school, I would film my classmates. I would make videos of the footage I shot. Not of us, like, we weren't acting in it and anything. It was just like documenting, our day to day. And so I've always just naturally just like loved documenting things. And that's why, the genre, like documentary filmmaking is just something that comes very natural to me. It's what I love to do. And yeah, so that's kind of how, I went to the University of British Columbia. I studied film production. And I've always wanted to tell the story of the Vancouver Grizzlies. That's just one of the stories I've always wanted to tell in my career.
All right, well, let's get into that then. So based on your previous film about finding the big country, which ostensibly is an adjunct into the broader story of the Grizzlies, which is obviously part of your upcoming film, The Grizzlie Truth. Yes. Take us back to what I'm guessing is the early to mid 1990s. You as a young lady growing up in the Vancouver area, set the tone for us about your childhood, your understanding of the city, and how you become even aware of this thing called the Vancouver Grizzlies.
Yeah, I mean, I have an older brother, and so I kind of followed everything that he did. So when he was into baseball, I was into baseball. When he was into hockey, I was into hockey. And then, in the 90s when MJ was taking over, every corner of the world, my brother obviously got into basketball, and then I got into basketball, and it was just a sport that came very naturally to me, just like documentary filmmaking. And it just so happened at the same time that was happening, the Grizzlies had just entered the league, and so it was like the perfect time for the NBA to come to Vancouver, because it was just I always say, like, the Grizzlies really cemented my love for the game, because it was just so much fun. Like, the NBA did such a great job, with the game entertainment. We weren't the best team. In fact, we were one of the worst teams in NBA history, but I truly didn't know that when I was a kid. I didn't care. It was just so much fun to go to games.
So you and your brother were basketball fans prior to the announcement and the arrival of this team, or would you say it kind of coincided?
I would say beforehand, and then shortly after the Grizzlies. I mean, I don't know like the exact timeline, but we were basketball. I was getting to basketball before the Grizzlies came, and then the Grizzlies came, and it was just sort of like, it was a done deal.
All right. So how do you discover the arrival of this team? Was it like impossible to avoid? And, it's one thing to sort of like say, wow, cool, a team's coming, but it costs money to go to games and become a fan and sort of take it all in, and all the souvenirs and all that kind of stuff. How do you, and how old are you at this point of time when the Grizzlies are becoming the real thing you can go down the street and watch?
Yeah, I was 6 years old when they came, and I was very lucky because my grandfather and my dad would get tickets to games. So I was able to go to, I feel like my grandfather was probably there for the inaugural game. Like I don't think I was there for that, but he would have been there for that. And we have some film photos that he took from his camera, because he was, again, still documenting everything. So yeah, I was 6 years old when I started going to Grizzlies games, and when the Grizzlies came to town, I still have all of the ticket stubs. My dad and my grandfather saved like all the tickets from games that we used to go to, so I have it in like my basketball sort of like scrapbook, all the games that my brother, mom, dad, we went to.
You remember the first game you went to at GM Place? Not necessarily.
I don't remember the first game. But my most memorable game was probably when I saw Charles Barkley with the Houston Rockets play, because it was like I was like, it's Charles Barkley, and he's like, we sat right above the tunnel of the opponents. So it was like, it was so cool to be like that. He's right there, like Charles Barkley's right there, and that I think was the most memorable game that I have.
Well, how about I guess the question was really more, I guess, around sort of the general aura and senses, perhaps, that you might remember, just generally going to games.
Yeah.
A baseball game, you see the green field for the first time, and like this, and you smell the grass and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, again, like I don't remember the first time, but I 100% remember like the feeling that I got, walking to GM Place I love walking into the stadium where like you see the court, you see the players warming up, you see the cheerlead, like the dancers, like with their like pom-poms, like getting ready, the music's blaring, like you see all these like NBA superstars like right in front of you. That's what I remember.
Where and when do you sense that you cross that line from, a kid going to an event, a game, an event, it's gonna with a crowd and all that kind of stuff, to, let's call it fandom, or this is something I need more of on a more regular basis?
Sorry, like you mean when did I become a
like when did the fandom really start to happen, right? I'm guessing as a kid you're drawing diagrams of plays, or you're seeing certain players that are particularly interesting to you that you might want to follow or maybe have on your jersey, but it's one thing to go to a game, as a curiosity and as an event once in a while, but it's quite another to kind of fall in love with a team, right? It's only there for 6 years. I'm guessing there's a fandom there that sort of gets, you're following the stats, that kind of stuff.
I was still like, when the Grizzlies left, I was still just 12 years old. And so it's not like I was like, I definitely wasn't one of those fans who was like, looking up stats or memorizing stats or anything like that. I was just, I think I was still just, like a kid who was just so taken by what I was seeing and just so energized, and I guess maybe like the word I would use like is inspired, like just just so blown away by the magic of it all. And I didn't start collecting. I only started collecting Grizzly stuff like long after the Grizzlies had gone. I every game I was allowed to get like one small thing from the team gift shop, and I never wanted clothes because like as a kid, like why would you want a sweater? Why would you want like a jersey? I wanted like a keychain, like a Grizzlies keychain. I wanted a small Grizzlies basketball, like things like that. And it was only until the Grizzlies left that I started to like want like Grizzlies clothing and Grizzlies paraphernalia. And so that like the fandom, maybe I was still a fan as a kid, but maybe like the fandom started long after the Grizzlies left.
So, okay, this is interesting. All right. So let me ask then a two-part sort of follow-up to that. All right. So number one, when in your older life did you start to kind of look back and say, hey, I wouldn't mind having a few of these more memorable souvenirs, shall we say, or I'm really becoming more of a fan of this thing that doesn't exist anymore? And then the second part is, does it go back to maybe a feeling that you had when at 12 years old, the team was leaving? How did that go over with you at that time?
Oh man, there's lots of, I have to like dig into the memory bank for these questions. They're great questions, but I mean, I don't want to say I wasn't a fan as a kid, because I would still label myself a fan as a kid, but I was just, I think I was still quite young, to be, it's not like I was like, looking at the schedule as a kid and being like, okay, like we have to win this many games for us to, make the championship or whatever. It was like, there's a Grizzlies game today and I really want to go, and again, I attribute to that just being, 6, 7, 8 years old, and still quite young. And just being, just viewing the Grizzlies with, like viewing and watching games and being a fan of the Grizzlies through a child's eyes. Maybe that's just the best way to explain it. I don't know. In terms of the question about when did I start to want to like collect things, I was always a huge basketball fan. Even when the Grizzlies left, I was into Space Jam. My room, like I have all the Space Jam toys still. I was, Steve Nash became my player when the Grizzlies left. I was just a huge fan of the game, and not just the Grizzlies, but just like the game of basketball. My room was just like covered in basketball stuff. And so, yeah, I think, I don't remember when I started to want to collect Grizzly stuff. I had Grizzly stuff in my room from when I was a kid, and I can't say like when I wanted more stuff, but I do remember seeing things pop, like, seeing more things in vintage stores, like when I was in university. No, maybe it was even after university. It was probably after university, and that's when I started to make friends with collectors and who knew I was a huge fan. I think collectors really love it when they find people who are actually fans of whatever, in my case it was the Grizzlies, to sell their things to. They don't just want to sell it to anyone. They would rather sell it to someone who actually understands the backstory behind items and things like that. So I had a friend who is one of the biggest Grizzlies collectors, and he started selling me stuff, and I just started to collect more and more things. And the great thing about these movies is that people watch the film and then they'll say, oh, I have a box of Grizzly stuff, and they see how much I love the team, so they'll send me a message to be like, hey, do you want any of this stuff? Like, it's just sitting in my in my attic or whatnot. So that's also been a way for me to make my collection grow.
Well, I want to get into some of the elements of the films in a second, but it almost feels to me like your appreciation for this team almost grows or has grown in the years that have piled up since they left versus maybe the actual 6 years that they were there, or maybe it's just a different sort of framing, right? Because in some respects, it feels like this is a team that it literally lives on in the form of Memphis, right? But it's also sort of suspended in time, and it's kind of something that maybe a mythology sort of grows around it, especially as you come into contact with some of those people with those souvenirs and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Vancouver Grizzlies merchandise is probably some of the hottest merchandise like in the market in Vancouver. It is so hard to find. They sell so quickly, and they go for a very steep price now. And some collectors have gotten mad at me for blaming my films for driving up the prices, so they can't. It's harder for their collection to grow. So their popularity has skyrocketed. After they left Vancouver, and you walk down and you see the street in Vancouver, you'll see many people wearing Grizzly stuff, many young people wearing Grizzly stuff. And sometimes I've had conversations with people who have no idea what the team is or the jerseys are, and they're wearing it and they have no idea about the team's origins or history, which is kind of funny.
All right. Well, what's also kind of funny is that I know it's funny. It's serial comic, I guess. Like in the Finding Big Country film, right? You're going on the streets of Vancouver, asking people literally, do you remember the Vancouver Grizzlies? I think you even interview or find somebody who actually even has a piece of Vancouver clothing on, Grizzlies clothing or something, and almost to a person they don't know. And it's really interesting to watch your reaction to that. But it's almost like you expect that to be the answer, which is itself a little sad, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think the guy in Finding Big Country who's wearing shorts and he's like, I don't know who. I think he just wasn't being the nicest person. I do think he probably did know who the team was, but just didn't want to talk to me. But it always gets such a big laugh whenever we screen it in front of a live audience. But yeah, I definitely am surprised, when people, when I ask them if they know who the Grizzlies are, and they do. And but at the same time, I think now that the films have been made, there's so many, I've met so many people who were huge fans of the team while they were here. Like everyone, if you grew up in Vancouver in the 90s, everyone kind of has at least one Grizzlies memory.
Yeah, it may be not too dissimilar than a previous generation, say in the late 70s, early 80s, with the original incarnation of the Vancouver Whitecaps on the soccer front, right? I suspect it's also, because that came and went too on a strange basis. Well, let me ask you this question then. Where does your personal and budding professional interest in filmmaking coincide, overlap, crash into your evolving fandom in retrospect of this team? Like, how do you, what's the leap that you make and go, I got to make a film, or at least one, to either pay homage to this team or find out answers to questions about this team that I never really found an answer to?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in university, ESPN's 30 for 30 was it was a series that was just coming out, that I absolutely loved. And, I played basketball. I come from a sports background. And so a series like that really inspired me. And I was in film school at the time, and I was always like, man, like, I want to one day direct a 30 for 30. And I already know the story. Like, I want to tell the story of the Grizzlies. And because of the more digging I did with the team, I realized how we weren't the greatest team. And that kind of it intrigued me, because I didn't know that we were that bad. And I felt like the team meant so much to me and inspired me in so many ways that I was like, okay, I don't think anyone can tell this story like I can tell it, because I think that no one will have the same respect for the team and the same love for the team that I will have. And therefore, no one can protect their story like I can. And so that's why I want to be the one to tell this story. So I guess, yeah, so in university, that was sort of like, I was like, I want to make a 30 for 30, and I want to make a 30 for 30 about the Vancouver Grizzlies. That was sort of always the dream.
So in the ideation process, what's your hook? What's your thought process, right? Because finding Big Country doesn't seem to be like, this is the Vancouver Grizzlies story. As a matter of fact, you obviously the subsequent film is a little bit more, I guess, broad or bigger story. But how do you narratively create a hook to sort of hang your hat on, so to speak, to put a film together functionally?
So when I was first brainstorming like what to do, I was like reading every article about the Grizzlies. And every article with the Grizzlies ended with, the only player that hasn't publicly commented on his time with the Grizzlies is Bryant Reeves. I was like, and literally every article ended with that same line. And so I was like, I know my hook, I know my angle. I'm going to find Big Country. And at this moment in time, I wanted to make a feature. I wanted to tell the full story of the Grizzlies, but I was like, okay, but this will be my hook. Like, this will be the main narrative thread. We ended up getting it financed. And with the amount of money that we had, the grant money that we had, and the time that we had to deliver the film, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to tell the full story of the Grizzlies. So it was going to be, Finding Big Country ended up being, we were going to use it as a proof of concept, and it was supposed to be just like a 20-minute film. But in the edit room, we were like, let's just make it what it needs to be, and whatever that time frame is. And it ended up being a 43-minute film. And then it made a really big splash when it got released, and it opened so many doors. And again, I always knew I wanted to tell the full story. So even when I was interviewing Bryant, like Big Country, for Finding Big Country, I banked so many more questions that never made the final cut, because I knew I still wanted to tell the full story of the Grizzlies. And so, yeah, so that was always the plan. And thankfully, yeah, Finding Big Country did really well and opened doors. And we were able to get, people on board the Grizzlie Truth right away. It still took 2 years to fully finance. But that's kind of, yeah, that's how the hook came and how everything else kind of fell into place.
Well, Reeves it's an interesting, a very interesting person to kind of centralize that story, right? Because he was the first ever draft pick for this team, and he was basically played his entire career in Vancouver, and I think maybe for one further season in Memphis, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe he left just before the move. I don't know. But it's interesting. I mean, without revealing too much, because we certainly want to encourage people who have not seen either film to, of course, see them. But did he want to be interviewed for this? And what to without sort of giving stuff away? I mean, source of his reluctance or unwillingness, perhaps, to kind of talk about it seems odd from the outside, right?
Yeah, I mean, no one. I just knew that from my research that he was just really hard to track down, and a lot of people who like Barry Trammell, who's a famous sports reporter in Oklahoma, was just like, best of luck. I don't think you're gonna get him, but like, because we've been trying to get him for years, but because it's not that Bryant doesn't want to talk about this stuff. It's just that he doesn't like. He would rather be with his family. He would rather be on his ranch, and I have so much respect for that. But, I was able to, again, spoiler alert, I do find Big Country. Still watch the film, as you're saying, Tim. But Bryant, I was able to get him to sign on because I got his teammates and his friends on board, and I built a really good trusting relationship with them, and then they kind of convinced him to do this. And so Bryant was just so kind, and we had a blast filming this together, and I felt like I don't think he was humoring me, but I felt like he understood what this meant to me as a childhood fan, and that's why he decided to do it.
So putting in that framework, then, how much of these films are about the story in particular, that is the history of the team, the time that they were there, what it meant to the city, and why they came and why they left, and how much of it is, if you will, about you?
Sorry, the Grizzlie Truth, you mean? Or like
well, both of them really, because they're personal investigation, shall we say, right?
Yeah, I mean, I never set out to make films with me being like arguably the lead protagonist in. When I pitched Finding Big Country for the first year, I didn't want to I would only include myself in the pitch when I could tell that people weren't interested in the story, because people were like, the Grizzlies, what, I don't think people are going to remember, or not that many people will care. And then I had to I'd say like, no, I know there's a market for this, but also like, here's my story, here's my connection to the team, here's why the team is important to me. And then I brought like a document that had like a bunch of like pictures of me as a kid playing basketball. I had drawings of the Grizzly the drawings of the Grizzlies that I drew when I was a kid. And that's when people started to lean in and say, okay, tell me more. This is now I'm starting to see it, or now I get it, so that's kind of why my story kind of got intertwined with Finding Big Country. And then even funnier is that after Finding Big Country, I was like, okay, I was in that film. I don't want to be in this next one. And I want to just, I want this to be sort of like a more traditional, like, documentary about the Grizzlies. But because of the success of Finding Big Country, our exec producers, our broadcasters were like, no, now we want you in this one too. So, which is also, it is tiring to be director and like in the film, but it was also just still such a blast. I had so much fun, being on camera and being with interacting with the players.
Well, no, there's absolutely something to be said there, right? Because it's not just a convention or a hook per se. I mean, in many respects, this is a personal journey for you. I mean, you're going back in time to your childhood. I'm sure there are things that you're trying to sort of align with what your initial impressions or memories were. I mean, I'm sure when you were 7 years old, you didn't recognize that the team was on their second or third coach of how many coaches did they have? They had like 5 coaches in 6 years, right? I'm sure you didn't sort of meticulously remember that, but it's also it's kind of a personal journey too, and to the extent that your childhood, it was in a big part of your childhood, it's a good 6 years, was enmeshed with the existence and then the disappearance of this team.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent like, I joke and say that I've spent the majority of my adult life like researching the Grizzlies and trying to tell their story. So they've been a huge part of my childhood and a huge part of my adult life as well.
All right, what's this? 417 helmets. My goodness. Well, you've heard me talk about 417helmets.com, collectible helmets and more on this very show fairly often. Our pal Judd Lesher down in southwest Missouri, I think in the Springfield, Missouri area, if I'm not mistaken. What is it? 417helmets.com. Well, first, if you dig all of our great football stories and episodes of the past, and you'd like to commemorate some of them in mini helmet form, really cool, sort of literal high quality, professionally, made materials, but in a mini format that you could put on your desk or put on your in your bookshelf or whatever it is, and just about every league that's ever existed, save from the NFL. We're talking XFL, old versions of the WFL. Remember the World Football League? How about various teams, both current and past, in the Canadian Football League, but also NCAA teams of yore and NAIA college football teams of yore, all of them and many, many, many more available for you at 417helmets.com. But that's not it. That's not it, friends. There's plenty more to be had. How about mini baseball helmets? Yeah, a whole bunch in the Negro Leagues, and yes, officially licensed by the Negro League Hall of Fame. You can get a bunch, and they're making more all the time. And by the way, custom helmets can be made too, both of the baseball and the football variety. You got your business, maybe a promotional thing you want to do for your company, perhaps your organization, you want to raise some funds, all that kind of stuff. Great custom approaches to both mini football and mini baseball helmets can be made at your command for you to enjoy and to sell or resell or give away. All of that and more. That's the more part at 417helmets.com. It's collectible helmets and more. And we've got a promo code for you, too, for whatever you purchase. All of them, all of your purchases, 10% off all of those when you use the promo code GOODSEATS. Again, promo code GOODSEATS for 10% off all of your purchases at 417helmets.com. Thanks, Judd, and thank you all for listening and trying them out. And now back to our conversation. Let me ask you this. As you approached both of these films, and maybe you approached them differently because you learned stuff in the first one, of course, that informed the second one, what did you think you knew about the team? And I guess in the first one's case, a big country, and what did you learn in the process that might have changed or rejiggered your memories or your thoughts or your belief set, if you will, as you learned and talked to people in their memories?
I mean, for the Grizzlie Truth, I really didn't understand why the team left. Like, it did feel like they kind of up and left. Just one day they were here, the next day they weren't. And so it was just really interesting to get to speak to those. And, everyone has an opinion about the Grizzlies. Everyone, has someone to blame in terms of, fans. But when you talk to people who are actually worked within the organization, who are actually there, they have such a different perspective. And that's when, as a filmmaker, that's when I was able to recognize, okay, there's something here, because clearly everyone's wires are crossed, because the people who actually live the experience of the Grizzlies have such a different story to tell from super fans who are coming up with all these scapegoats and conspiracy theories. And so I kind of just wanted to make something that could kind of set the record straight, and you could actually hear from those who were actually involved. So yeah, I guess, what did I learn? I just tried to keep an open mind and was really just trying to understand, how complex the situation was, and that, yeah. So I guess I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking to people though in the process, both behind the scenes and on the camera, I mean, would you characterize most of the people that you talk to as remembering these 6 years or so fondly or wistfully, or in some cases maybe even worse? Are they that disparate in terms of their memories, or was there a universal theme of, good times, we didn't know it, that kind of thing? Or what was there a general consensus as you were talking to people?
I think it was a mix. It was definitely a mix. There's people because I interviewed maybe oh man, we did sit down interviews with 50 plus people. I did phone interviews with 100 plus people, phone and Zoom interviews. There are fans who, we interviewed childhood fans who still remember the magic the team brought them, but who still are so heartbroken that the team left. We interviewed people who worked for the organization who, yeah, it was a mix. It was people who look back fondly, but also I guess maybe that's the consensus. It was they can look back fondly at how beautiful the time with the Grizzlies was, but also how painful it was when they left and how hard that was.
Any personal tragedies in that mix, or is it kind of people just say, hey, that's just the business, that's basketball, comes, it goes, that kind of stuff?
What do you mean by personal tragedies?
Some people, depending on the themes and how times in their lives and stuff. I mean, one could look at Big Country not being that easily findable, for example. He might have harbored some ill will or some, obviously you disavowed that, by getting to him. But I mean, there were 6 coaches, right? In 6 years. I wonder if any of them left a bitter taste in their mouths as they were trying to right the ship, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think everyone was within the organization didn't want, at least, not the Memphis, because the team that eventually brought the team to Memphis, but those who were with the Grizzlies from day one didn't want to see the team go. People who, once the Grizzlies left, so many people were out of their jobs, right? This had been their job. This had been even some of the I interviewed some of the dancers who were still, some of them were quite young and were in university, college, who wanted to work in sports management, sports media, and the goal was the NBA. I'd love to work and so that dream of ever working for the organization kind of left with the team. So in that sense, it was very sad that the team left, and there was tragedy in that sense, where a lot of people lost their jobs when the Grizzlies moved to Memphis.
Yeah, it sounds to me too, there are a couple of other things that, again, in hindsight, you probably discover in the conversations and setting this up versus in the actual years that you were in the stands, right? I mean, there was a labor issue in 98, which didn't help. And I think, frankly, the fact that maybe to a lesser extent in Toronto, as that expansion franchise was granted around the same time, there was this currency exchange thing between Canada and the United States. And it's the proverbial issue of, the value of a Canadian dollar not being the same that of a US dollar. And the fact that it's a league that at the time and certainly now plays in both countries. It almost feels like there was a whole bunch of those things in particular almost conspiring, maybe also negatively, as well as the fact that there were multiple owners and the inconsistency, I guess, perhaps, of management.
Yeah, I mean, it was exactly kind of all of the above, what you're saying. Just everything that could go wrong went wrong for the Grizzlies. Yeah, that's kind of how. That's what I like to say.
But you didn't sense any of this as a kid, huh? You just kind of papered over that in your fandom, so to speak. You just were there for the games, and you didn't care what the adults were really doing behind the scenes.
Yeah, I don't think many of us kids did care. I didn't care that we lost like 20 games. I didn't really, the games were just so much fun. Maybe had I been older, I think had I been older, like there's a bunch of, when the Find Away Country played, people maybe a decade older than I was at the time would come up to me and be like, they have a very different memory of the Grizzlies. So it was actually maybe a good thing that I was so young when the Grizzlies came to be.
Okay. Do you think that if you had been older, that you would have been as much of a fan per se? Would you have been more, shall we say, discerning or cynical, or I guess I got to think that it probably wouldn't have been the case because Vancouver was a basketball city. That's a big deal at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I probably, yeah, I'm guessing I'd still be a fan. I don't know how much the losing would have upset me. Maybe it would have. I don't know. But yeah, I don't. I'm just trying to think of, the thing I love about Grizzlies fans, even the ones who might have been upset that we lost so much. I still think that the Grizzlies, the thing I love, one of the things I love most about the story of the Grizzlies is the fact that we were so bad, yet we had a really great fan base. And I feel like that's like the essence of sports, is like, it doesn't matter win or lose, we're still going to show up and we're still going to like cheer for you and we're still going to support you. And that's the Vancouver Grizzlies were to the fan base. Like that's what the fan base, that's what we were to the Grizzlies. So one of the goals of the film was to really highlight the fans of the team and how much we love the team. Those who were my age and those who were, a bit older, who might have understood what was going on even more than I did.
All right. Well, let's round third base here and bring this into home. So let me ask you this: given that sort of fond assessment, I guess, of the Vancouver fan base, obviously that's in the 90s, which was a number of decades ago. What of the market today would you say? I mean, if the circumstances were possible where, and I think right now NBA expansion and relocation is definitely on the table these days. Do you think Vancouver is still or newly suitable to house and cheer on an NBA franchise, or has time kind of marched on and sensibilities being different, or is there an untapped fan base, say like in Seattle, to kind of bring that back?
No, I think Vancouver could 100% support a team. Whenever there's an exhibition game, NBA exhibition game here in Vancouver, we sell out instantly. Doesn't matter who's playing. I think there's like basketball has just grown since the Grizzlies left here in the city. So I 100% think that we could support a team if the NBA were to come back. We just need a rich billionaire or a few rich billionaires to buy the franchise for us.
So let me ask you this: do you, and then by extension, the fans that or came to meet, and maybe even some of the subjects of these films, do you care about the Memphis Grizzlies? Do you follow them? Do they follow them? Or is the Vancouver Grizzlies of the 6 years before they moved to Memphis pretty much a time capsule and it ended when they left town?
That's a complicated question. Like, when the Grizzlie Truth, not to give too much away, but I do end up going to Memphis. I get to know the people in Memphis, and I kind of fall in love with the community there, who fully embrace me, and I learned some valuable lessons while I'm in Memphis. When people still ask me who's your favorite team, who do you cheer for, I'll still say the Vancouver Grizzlies, even though the team doesn't exist. But before I made the Grizzlie Truth, I think I was a bit more jaded towards Memphis. I'm not now. I do think that our legacy lives on through that city. And I think the film definitely, I've heard that the film is very cathartic for diehard Grizzlies fans who needed closure, who now can can maybe, they might not be diehard Memphis fans, but they can now, watch a Memphis game without feeling like the pain that they had once before.
There's something we kind of discovered over the course of doing these silly little shows is this idea of we call it retcon or retroactive continuity. And it's a little bit more applicable for, say, I don't know, a Minnesota North Stars merging into what is now the San Jose Sharks in the NHL, and a recognition that, or the Colorado Rockies or the Kansas City Scouts, which then merged into the New Jersey Devils. And the question or the issue around that is how much or how little do the current versions of these teams embrace what came before them? And again, I don't want you to give it away per se, but I guess I'm curious, based on your learnings, how much or how little the Memphis organization remembers the 6 years of Vancouver, or would they and the NBA prefer those sort of not to be remembered?
No, I think that the Memphis organization has in the past honored and remembered their roots. They had the throwback jerseys for the 25th year anniversary. They kept the name. And I know that, if we ever wanted an NBA team back, I'd have mixed feelings, because I do love the Vancouver Grizzlies like that. That, like, I don't know what other mascot we could choose that would be as like powerful and as good as the Grizzlies, but they kept the name. And I think that's one of the things when I was interviewing someone who worked for the Memphis Grizzlies, who was saying like that is one of the that's one of the ways where they it's not like they took the franchise and made it something else. They kept the name, so it's still, you know what I mean, so it still has like ties to Vancouver. A lot of the records that within the organization are still kept, they still uphold the records of like Sharif and Big Country and Mike Bibby and whoever else from the Vancouver Grizzlies set any record. So they're still part of the conversation as well.
So your advice then, not advice, but your sense is that it's interesting. It sounds, the way you describe that, it almost feels like there are two compartments. There's the Vancouver and the Memphis, but yet there are some threads of continuity there that seems, you said cathartic, but seems like a license to allow it to sort of live on as a continuous story.
Yeah. That's great. We put it really, really well there. It's still like the story's still ongoing, and I think Vancouverites can be proud that if Memphis is doing well, it's still part of, like we are a part of that as well.
All right, last set of questions is about the film itself and how you promote and all that kind of stuff. So, first of that is, can you give our audience a sense of how extraordinarily difficult it is to make an independent documentary type of film, just generally, and then the distribution process and how you fund things along the way? I don't think people, I think people on the outside kind of just take for granted that a 30 for 30 is going to pop up on their screen, and it's just simply not that easy.
Yeah, I mean, there could be another, like, how long do you have, essentially, is my response. I mean, the Grizzlie Truth started in 2015 when I set out to make Finding Big Country. The amount of hours that I put into this, probably didn't even make minimum wage. Like, it's just, I was working nonstop every single day, no break, no vacation. It was so intense, and you're hustling so hard. You're pitching to everyone. You're getting rejected by everyone. I had no connections to the NBA prior to this. And, so like everyone that you see who, is doing an interview with me from the organization, or as a player or someone who worked for the Grizzlies, that's just me sending out like hundreds of emails, doing hundreds of Zoom calls. It was just, it was a lot. Documentaries are such a grind, because you also are building relationships with people. You're building a foundation of trust, and that takes time as well.
In those points of, I won't call them despair, maybe they were sometimes, what keeps you going? Why continue? Especially if the money isn't necessarily coming in, or may never come in if you don't complete the film and get the distribution deal and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think, and filmmakers in general, it's not just documentary filmmakers, but I think we are so driven by this like voice that won't go away about a story that we can't let go of. And for me, in my case, it was like the story of the Grizzlies, and I knew someone was going to tell this story, and I knew that, like, if I didn't get my act together, if I didn't work as hard as I did, someone would do it, and it wouldn't be me. And that, just like that thought and that feeling was what drove me and motivated me. So that's kind of why I think there's something like, sometimes I do wish that I could just not make films, because they're so hard to make. But it's just the voice that just won't go away. And so you just have to, and at the same time, like, I'm saying this, I had so much fun. Making this. I got to meet all my childhood heroes. I got to go on so many adventures with my team. Like, we had such a blast making this film. It was so much fun. And as much as it was hard, it was 100% worth it.
Okay. And how does the distribution part work? Does that begin during the process of making it, or do you kind of just want to make it first and then deal with that? And frankly, it's also a modern day question. What does even distribution look like these days, given the rise of streaming, let's say, over the last 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, we've partnered. So I'm in Canada. We have our distributors, Photon Films, who have been so fantastic and have been huge supporters of my film and my career. We are on like Crave, Apple TV, Google Play, Shaw, Telus, Rogers, Cineplex Movies. Like, we're on all, like, a bunch of different streaming platforms, just all these platforms. In the States, our sales agent is Cargo Films, and so they're right now shopping it around, and we are, that's kind of how I'm still honestly learning about all of this, but that's who's kind of pushing the film for us out there in the world.
All right, so here's the last question then. Finally, I know you're finally ready to be done, I'm sure, with this interrogation. What do you think you've got sort of in the aside from getting this film out, and further distribution and stuff, what other, a lot of what you've done to date in your career has been sort of at this nexus of documentary production and sports. There's some other things you've done in sports too. Is that kind of the lane that you've picked out for yourself going forward? Are there other stories in that genre, or do you have other ideas, documentary or otherwise, sports or otherwise, that you think you want to pursue or maybe have on your plate next?
Yeah, no, I definitely, there's many more stories that I want to tell, not just sports related stories. I have a few in development, and only I think one of them is sports related, and the other 3 or 4 are not. So yeah, I definitely, I come from a sports background. I think it's really, it's an exciting time, especially for like female sports to watch kind of the female games kind of grow. I think it's a very exciting time, and kind of, being in this genre, being in this, the sports media landscape, and having, been able to make a few films. I do want to see more representation, and so I definitely want to continue to play in this field, to help other female filmmakers through the door, to continue working so that more stories can be told through the perspective of of like a female lens telling sports stories. I think that's really important. So I do want to, I have other films I want to make, other stories I want to tell, but I definitely still want to keep, a foot in the door to tell sports stories.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not a documentarian. I just play one on TV, but I do think this period of time that we're in now, at least from a professional, maybe even college sports realm, I think we're kind of I think it's kind of a bubble in some respects. I mean, private equity and buying all the valuations of all these teams and stuff, and the plethora of, I don't know, ESPN Ocho type new leagues or 4 volleyball leagues and World Chase Tag and pickleball leagues and rugby and we've got cricket coming back to the United States after a couple of failed attempts. I mean, it's the best of times, but I don't know how long those last. And I got to tell you, I think the seeds of the mini and full documentaries for the next decade are probably being sown right now. If people are taking notes, I don't know. Maybe that's not interesting to you, but to me, as a vibe going in the sports world, I see that, and it seems like they're just ready to be at least foundationally built for construction in a few years when maybe things are not as financially rich.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many cool series coming out, so I don't doubt what you're saying.
Well, I doubt what I say very often, but I do. This has been great. So, fair disclosure to our listeners, I've only seen the first of these 2 films that we've talked about, Finding Big Country. I have not seen The Grizzly Truth because it's not available here yet. I've just seen the promo.
Right.
I eagerly await it. And how from as we record this in late June of 2023, where can people find this as far as either both stateside and in Canada, or even worldwide for that matter?
We'll be in New Zealand soon. We are still trying to find a home in the States, but you can watch the film on Delta flights. So if you Delta, and maybe is it JetBlue too? I know Delta for sure. So we've been getting so many messages from people who are watching the film in the air. So yeah, if you want to watch The Grizzly Truth, go buy a ticket to Delta on a Delta flight, and you'll be able to watch our film. However, thousands of feet in the air.
All right, tremendous amounts of interestingness there. Thank you to Kat for that chat. And let us get you set for all of the stuff that Kat has produced for this particular topic, that most of which is findable in the United States and elsewhere, depending on where you're listening. So here goes. I think the best place to start is her website at katjayme.com. That's Kat, K-A-T, Jayme, J-A-Y-M-E, katjayme.com. You can follow her on Twitter at katjaymefilms and on Instagram at katjaymefilms. The movie that's kind of in soft release, I believe it's available in Canada in various places, not yet in the United States, but very soon, and we will let you know, of course. But you can follow all the doings of The Grizzlie Truth, which is the name of that film, on Twitter at The Grizz, G-R-I-Z-Z, Truth, at The Grizz Truth. We'll let you know when we find out where it's available in the States, but following that on the Twitter will certainly help you as well. Finding Big Country, however, has been out since 2018 and is widely available. You'll find it on Amazon Prime Video, or you can go to that via our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com. Search up this episode with Kat Jayme, numbered 312, and there'll be a convenient referral link there from that episode listing there on the site, and we'll get a Canadian penny or two of referral love, and you can stream it right there on your device or whatever you want to watch it on. You can also follow that news for that movie on Twitter at Finding Big C and on Instagram at Finding Big Country. I think there's also a Facebook page too called at Finding Big Country as well. Let's see. While you're at Kat's website, you will also discover a couple of other features that are well worth watching too as part of this conversation. One is a short film called We the West, which is, I think, I guess you could say a spinoff, if you will, of her efforts around the Finding Big Country movie, which really delves into the fans and the fan culture, the memories and the garb, the apparel, the other ways by which people remember this 6-year experience that was the Vancouver Grizzlies. And you'll find some amazing jackets and shirts and other ways that people keep the memories alive of that time in the late 90s, early 2000s when Vancouver had the Grizzlies as an NBA franchise. That's a fun film. And another fun film, which has a bit of a tangential relationship to this story too, which I believe is also on the NBA's website, but is also viewable on Kat's website too, is called Born Identities. It's a short, an award-winning short, by the way. I think just about everything she's done thus far has won a whole bunch of different awards. It delves into the creation, the ideation, and the execution of both the Toronto Raptors and Vancouver Grizzlies logos, which is interesting kind of stuff. And that's 1995-ish types of stuff. And you'll appreciate the 90s vibe when it comes to the colors and the schemes and the logo treatments and all that kind of stuff. And there's also another great film that's out there in the ESPN 30 for 30 ether. I believe it is soon to be released through that channel. It's called I'm Just Here for the Riot. Let's just put it this way. The Vancouver Canucks make a major appearance in that film too. So again, our thanks to Kat Jayme. Lots of stuff there to enjoy, and hopefully more great stuff to come from her. And we'll certainly enjoy keeping in touch with her for that. While you're zooming around online, make sure that you bookmark our website, goodseatsstillavailable.com. Follow us on social media. We're on Twitter at goodseatsstill, on Instagram at goodseatsstillavailable, on Facebook at goodseatsstillavailable as well. Yes, we are on Threads at goodseatsstillavailable. So stay tuned to that. If you've just downloaded that and used that, we'll try to spiff that up in the weeks to come as well, and add that to our pile of social media dissemination for you. Our email address is hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. Please send us some. And thank you, of course, as always, to the great Atlanta Georgian by the name of Jerry Payne, Jerry Payne Audio Excellence. Thank you for your knob twiddling this week. And thank you, kind listener. Until next week, we look forward to another episode coming your way. Check your feeds. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
In 1995, I was 6 years alive when my dad told me the news. I got a sparkle in my eye, I remember it. Yeah, it wasn't just any day when I found out Vancouver joined the NBA. It was a big deal for Canada. With thumbtacks and tape, I put the banner up. I dreamt of the jump shot while they dreamt of the gumdrops. Lambo on the trampoline while others did the bum drops. I loved watching the Grizzlies do the thing. It was a new regime when we got Abdul Rahim. But then the season got locked out in 98. And when they came back, Big Country gained a lot of weight. They never won, every season was tragic. But in 99, man, we got a second draft pick. So maybe things were looking up after all. We could be more than the laughing stock of basketball.
In my room, I sat and wondered, where could my baby left me? She went to Memphis. In my room, I sat and wondered, now what's to become of me? My baby left me. She went to Memphis.
They gave me the rock, it's like the same day they took it away. Van City, when the team came, embarrassed their name. Apparently blame the errors that came. Started with the white boy drafted with no game, who needed road game footwork and had a fear of traffic. They drafted him for marketing and demographics. Could've had Radlib with that draft pick. Chose Big Country and we got our ass kicked. As if Heisley ever gonna leave the team in the town of marijuana. Now them is goners. Memphis go to work, boys. The jersey suck, but still I rock the turquoise. It was the politics that got us after all, and they tease us like a new team is coming back to y'all. Mad they had to fall, Francis with the casket call. Love my city, but man, I miss the basketball. In my room, I sat and wondered, where could my baby left me? She went to Memphis. In my room, I sat
she went to Memphis.
People ask me, so do you cheer for Memphis? That's like cheering when dudes French kiss your exes. That's like cheering for Lex Luthor or Dem Looters after the Stanley Cup giving a bad name to Vancouver. I love to sit with David Stern and maybe have a word, but how we let the team leave, how could he have the nerve to move the team premature and give Sharif the word to load the plane next to Dickerson and Tony Massenberg? And to be super honest, they even moved the Supersonics, so being a fan of Western Canada's super awkward. I mean, we still have Steve Nash, but all I really want is for them to bring my team back. And nowadays, the dollar is stronger, so if they move them back, we get some stars on the roster. Mr. David Stern, bad move, sir. Signed sincerely, the fans of Vancouver.